Yeah, you know, and speaking of organizationally, what, who was involved both in your compliance journey a little bit and maybe some changes and where there was some resistance, to changes that might have needed to be put in place.
Yeah. So again, as a relatively small org, a number of us wear multiple hats, and also the sort of lines of authority, like who's overseeing different dimensions of what we do, often resolve to one person. So for us, the key people were the CEO, really in the sense of just, yes, we've reached that point. Like these are the kinds of agreements that we need, and kind of giving that, if you will, that authorization that this is where we're going to have to spend some money to get ourselves to the right spot. In terms of the mechanics of supporting the journey to type 1 and type 2, that was mostly the product manager, which was essentially myself. The audit was specific to this learning application called EdReady. Director of operations, so all the HR stuff and everything around that, and then our CTO, who took primary responsibility for not just the sort of code side, but also the sysops, right? Maintenance of our systems, et cetera. I think within that, everybody felt a bit, I guess, there were concerns.
It's not the most exciting
Yeah,
project on the
across
docket.
all
Of course not.
parties.
Yeah.
Because it's not like what else we were doing full time or more than full time, just going to go on pause. So, there was an understanding that we were going to be squeezed a bit to find the time to make this work. I think if I had to say, I think most of that anxiety came back to what I mentioned earlier, which was this concern that we would be asked to do things or to meet requirements that were written for companies with 1,000 employees, right?
Yeah.
Not 18, or companies with brick and mortar offices where, if somebody were to literally break in, there would be, potential consequences, that kind of thing. And so I think there was again, it was just, we didn't know, right? Would the standard accommodate the fact that we're obviously very different from,
Mhm.
say, McGraw-Hill or some other, giant
Yeah.
company, which is otherwise potentially pursuing exactly the same auditable standard. So and that was where, again, for us, both to mitigate that anxiety and probably in the end, I'm willing to bet it radically reduced the amount of internal debate we might have had to have
Yeah.
about what is true and what isn't true. We needed a strike graph, right? We need a strike graph to sort of step in and say, all right, we'll help you make sense of all that. We'll find a way to right size this. That was a phrase I think you kept using.
Yeah.
Um, and make sure the stuff that you're trying to adhere to actually makes sense for the situation. And then could also sort of zero in on, of the 150 objects that we're pursuing, these are the 50 that really need close attention, right? It's not that the others aren't important, but just given the situation, those aren't going to take as much time and effort.
Foundational to our technology and philosophy about right sizing a cybersecurity practice is that risk assessment at the core of our system, like, much of our great education solutions. And uh, when we take a customer through the risk assessment, what we find is that they're pretty much doing 90% of what they need to pass an audit if they've been thinking about it. And
Right.
about 10% of change might, and being focused on what that change is so it's successful is the other part that's valuable. Yeah.